Hey, welcome to the channel. My name is Jason, and here I talk about all things story. And oh boy, do I have a story to talk about today. It is Midnight Mass, the Netflix miniseries or limited series, written and directed by Mike Flanagan. Now, before I get into talking about Midnight Mass, I think we should talk about Mike Flanagan, his work, and how I came to this lowly state. But if you would like to skip the intro, check the chapter selection where I get right to the review. I first discovered Mike Flanagan with his other Netflix film, Gerald's Game, which was adapted from the Stephen King novel. It was okay. It had kind of a TV movie vibe to it. The acting was mediocre, the directing, pretty much across the board. It was just sort of an average throwaway movie. And then the next thing I saw he was working on was The Haunting of Hill House, the adaptation of the classic Shirley Jackson novel. So I was excited a little bit. You know, Gerald's Game was okay. I didn't really know Mike Flanagan at the time. I watched episode 1, and that is all I needed to see. Terrible writing, mediocre acting, bad directing. I mean, it's just an endless platter of mediocrity. I did not see The Haunting of Blythe Manor. I didn't even know he was involved. I just saw that it looked like a soap opera, essentially, so I stayed away from that one. But then finally, another Stephen King adaptation, Doctor Sleep. Now, I'm a massive, massive Shining fan. It is by far one of my top 5 movies of all time. And I will argue to death that the movie is better than the book. I know Stephen King hates the film. But what Kubrick did is he whittled down, he carved all the fat, all the unnecessary stuff, which Stephen King is very well known for, and crafted an extremely compelling, extremely creepy tale of one man's descent into madness and how it affected his family. And it without a doubt holds up today. So I did read Dr. Sleep far before the movie came out. It was okay. It was, again, more Stephen King, sort of, interesting premise maybe, and then it just kind of falls apart into nothing. But when I saw this, it felt like Mike Flanagan was pissing all over Stanley Kubrick, honestly. Like, he did not have a grasp on the characters. He did not have a grasp. He still does not have a grasp on how to shoot something that looks nice. And I gave up about, 20 or 30 minutes into it. I just said, this is not. If you can't hook me by then, I'm done with it. All right, so why the hell am I here? Why did I watch Midnight Mass? I knew Mike Flanagan was involved. I knew he wrote and directed it. Why am I here? And that is because of one man, the sarcastic Scotsman of cinema, the critical drinker. I tend to agree with him on a lot of points. There's some things I disagree on, but anyway, I just stumbled upon his review of this, and luckily I cut it before the spoilers and his critique. I watched maybe 50% of it, and it was kind of a glowing review. Like, you could tell he was really into the themes and just the overall construction that Mike Flanagan had created here. And I said, okay, well, shit, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Mike Flanagan finally understood how to shoot something, direct something, cast something, and by God, write something that was good, maybe even great. So I dove in to Midnight Mass. And as usual, I'm going to be talking about writing, character, like I normally do with my books, because again, this is a storytelling channel, but I think there's going to have to be some visual things I talk about because those must be noted. So if I had to sum up Midnight Mass, give it a log line, so to speak, it would be something like Salem's Lot with some tweaks to create gaping plot holes where character development is exclusively done through cringy existential monologues that feel like they were written by an angsty teen dabbling in the profound. Hallmark horror, essentially. And by Hallmark, I mean the Hallmark Channel. So what did I think? Well, if you haven't stopped now, let's keep going. Let us dive deeper into this tragic tale. And we will talk about the hook. So what is the hook? What is Midnight Mass about? It takes place on an island with 127 souls called Crockett Island. They're a very religious community, and their priest is missing, Father Pruitt. He's 80 years old and is nowhere to be found. So, the town is up in arms. The core of their community is missing and must be found. But then we also have a parallel storyline. We have what seems to be our protagonist, a man named Riley Flynn. He moved away from this island to become a successful tech entrepreneur, or work in the tech industry anyway. He has a problem though. He's an alcoholic, and this alcoholism gets him into trouble. He decides to drink and drive, and he kills a young lady, which sends him to prison for about 5 years, where he does not find God, but he loses God. And then he returns, a broken and godless man, to Crockett Island to face his demons. All right, let us begin with character. My favorite topic, and I always say that, I know. So I think the first thing you'll notice about Midnight Mass is that there are actors in this. Now, this isn't story related, but there are actors who are wearing old people makeup, obviously so, and you're wondering why. The first one being Henry Thomas, or Elliot from E.T. Now, his makeup ages him maybe 10, 15, maybe 20 years max. And you're thinking, well, Mike Flanagan appears to like to work with the same cast or same group of people. And so he needed to be a convincing father for Riley Flynn, who's like 40 or so. So they aged him a little bit. Okay, I'm with you. But there is another woman. She is about 80-ish years old, or supposed to be. You can tell, again, a significantly younger actress is playing her. So the first thing I did was like, that's weird. What could that mean? And all that meant was my suspension of disbelief was suspended. So great work, Mike Flanagan. I'm already trying to figure out what's wrong with this picture. And the only conclusion I can come to is that something in this story is going to make people get younger. So episode 1, I'm only one episode in, not even, somewhere in the middle of episode 1, I'm guessing the plot. So congratulations, Mike Flanagan. You screwed up your plot in the first episode. But moving on, let's talk more about the characters. So Riley Flynn, who is kind of our protagonist, he's our POV character for much of the time. And we have trauma, right? He went to prison. He's struggling with alcoholism. Okay, that's great. We have Erin, sort of his childhood sweetheart. She's single and pregnant. Oh, okay, that's interesting. And there's even another girl, a young girl who is crippled. She was shot in the spine by a drunkard in the town. Okay, this all sounds interesting. Here's the problem. Here is the huge problem with the character work. We have a great setup. We have characters with trauma, differing traumas, so we know we're going to experience a story where they're going to face these. They're going to overcome them, perhaps, like, you normally do in a story. But how do they face these? Well, they do it in what I talked about earlier, and that is cringy, exhausting conversations. Monologues. So let's take Riley and Erin. So they're sitting on a couch. He begins to wax poetic about death. They're both talking about death. Ooh, it's such a profound thing to talk about. And of course, he's taking the godless point of view, where it's all about, he's made of atoms, he's made of stardust, and he just decays and returns to the earth. And anyway, this conversation lasts for 5 or 10 minutes, but it's not really a conversation. Like I said, it's a monologue. So he is blabbering on and on and on about this, and you're just kind of, okay, when is this going to end? And finally it ends. And then the camera cuts to Erin on the other side of the couch, and she begins her tale, recounting what death means to her, and it's through her daughter who she has lost. Her unborn daughter, I might add. And then so you're stuck there, sitting through this monologue, her dealing with her pain, her essentially trying to have her character arc in a monologue. And I'll talk about one more before I move on, but the crippled girl, she miraculously gains her ability to walk again. So what does she do? Well, she walks on over to the drunk man in his trailer, proceeds to stand across the room from him, and just unleash all of her anger, all of her sadness onto him. And he's blubbering in the corner. But you know what happens? I bet you'll never guess. She forgives him. Wow. So again, full character arc in the span of a monologue. So you can tell theme was very important to Mike Flanagan. And I think theme is a powerful thing. I think every story should have a theme of some kind. A lot of times that theme develops while you're writing the story. You don't inherently begin with theme. Sometimes you might. I really feel like Mike Flanagan began with theme in this story. It's just too glaringly obvious. He had so much to say and he didn't know how to say it. And so instead of having it develop through character action, plot points, and an actual arc, right, from beginning to end, what he does is he jams it into monologues throughout the show. And these aren't the only monologues. There's plenty more. Riley does another one in a boat, looking up at the stars, talking about, hey, lady, hey, girl, the cavemen, they looked up at those stars and they thought, wow, those are campfires. Who do you think those campfires are from? And then we processed those ideas and distilled them down into what we believe were gods, and then a god, and so on and so forth. I think you know where I'm going with this. And by the way, he's sitting in a boat surrounded by CG water, so yeah, there you go. And Father Pruitt, he comes back, has his own little strange character bit, which again, never is seated whatsoever in the story. It's about that he fathered one of the characters, the doctor in the town, the daughter of this 80-year-old woman who Benjamin buttons down to someone who's younger than her daughter. Yeah, there's a moment at the end where there's this revelation where he tells his daughter he's the father, and then she dies, and he and the mother, who is now young, sit down and talk talk about all these amazing stories about their daughter, and then they go have this moment where they're holding her in their arms over this bridge that they said was a special place to her. However, it was never, ever seeded throughout the story. These are things you need to do, okay? So if you want these powerful moments at the end of your tale to just heighten everything, heighten the drama, heighten the catharsis, you need to seed them. They need to feel like a logical conclusion to something that you have laid breadcrumbs for. I think that's another huge failing of this thing, is that there's all these things that you know were intended to be payoffs, but they never are because we were never given a reason to care about them or even really honestly know about them. I know I've been kind of mixing up the plot here, but before we keep going on more detail with the plot, let's talk about these strange visual choices. So I'm all for style in film. I love like Nick Refn's work. I love obviously Stanley Kubrick's work. I love using the visual medium as a way to tell a story beyond what you're showing, through composition, through color, through all of these things. So the first time where you think Mike Flanagan is trying to get clever is in prison with Riley Flynn. So he's lying on his bunk. The camera begins to dramatically turn 90 degrees until it looks like he's standing up. And then we do a 180 cut to the girl that he saw lying in the street at the very beginning of the show, the woman he killed. So no big deal, whatever. I mean, it's kind of funny because she was lying down anyway, so you wonder why they rotated the camera to have him sort of look like he's standing up because they make her standing up. Anyway, whatever. But what happens is when he gets to Crockett Island, when he goes back home, when he's lying in his childhood bed at his parents' house, we see the camera begin to turn slowly. And you're just like, okay, I know what's going to happen here. And my point is, repetition is good, right? But the way the repetition was done here wasn't really meaningful in any kind of character way. It just was a stylistic choice because I believe he thought it looked cool. It doesn't even make sense. Like I said, in the beginning, he's sitting upright. The girl's lying on the street dead, facing him. Why wouldn't you keep that configuration throughout? So maybe every time he lies down, he sees her. You see what I'm doing there? We have like a parallel. No, he decides to stand the dead girl up and then rotate the camera 90 degrees to make Riley Flynn upright like he's standing, and then cut to the girl and then do like a creepy shriek or whatever. So I don't know what he was trying to do there other than form over function. Speaking of more form over function, there is another scene. It's on the beach. There's all these dead cats. Everyone is wondering what's going on. The sheriff is there investigating. Townspeople are rushing up. He's saying, stay back, stay back. But one comes through and he begins to have a conversation with this man, and the camera slowly begins to rotate, circle these men. And you're thinking, okay, I've seen this before. It's sort of a way in dialogue in a film to mitigate the whole like back and forth cut, back and forth cut, back and forth cut, right? The problem with this though is it keeps going around and around and around and around. I mean, you're literally getting dizzy watching this thing. And it's not interspersed with cuts to mix it up. He's like, hey, I want to do one of those cool things, those one take shots. Wouldn't that be really cool? Hey, I have an idea. Let's not have it motivated by anything with a plot, anything about the character, anything about the pace of the scene. Let's just circle these guys on the beach for no other reason other than to say like, hey, I made a single take. That's exactly what the shot is. And the cinematography in this miniseries is like that all over the place. You're going to notice all kinds of strange things, and it's just kind of hit you because you know it's wrong, and it's going to take you out of the story, which is, you know, essentially what you never want to do. But enough with the cinematic choices. Let's move on to the plot. So as I said, our father, he's missing, and for some reason he travels to Israel. He meets a vampire. He gets bitten, but not turned into a full vampire yet, apparently. And somehow he lugs this vampire back to the island in this massive suitcase, and everyone just kind of like, okay, that's cool. And he's in the sun. Like I said, he's not full vampire, and so you're wondering, oh, is he doing a twist on vampirism here? And then there's this weird storyline where there's this hyper religious woman who doesn't like this dog, and the dog belongs to the drunkard, the guy who shot the crippled girl, and she poisons him with rat poison. And so you're like, okay, whatever, you know, the dog doesn't like her, he's a drunkard, he's you know, harmed a young lady. And then, you know, one day Father Pruitt just kind of stumbles into his house, and everybody's in there because he lets everybody in there, which is very important about, you know, the next thing coming up I'm going to talk about. He starts choking up, and you're thinking like, did she poison him? That must be it, right? Wait, he's a vampire. What's going on here? Does he not, maybe he didn't drink enough blood. Maybe that's what's going on. But no, he just resurrects. So you know now that he wasn't full vampire, you think, and for some reason she poisoned him, which they never really explained, to make him full vampire. So now he's relegated to his cottage or the church, or hosting what is known as, yes, midnight mass. Mass when the sun is not out because he's a vampire now. And we had to move the plot along, right? We had to get everybody into the church at night. But remember what I said about him allowing people into his cottage like it wasn't locked up? Well, there is a newspaper on his wall, a newspaper clipping. His photo is on it, him being young. And so that really gives away the fact that the young man, the Monsignor who replaced Father Pruitt is in fact Father Pruitt. So yeah, he's literally has a photo of himself up on the wall, this new guy that apparently nobody knows about. Thankfully, eventually one of the characters does see it. However, to me, it's a little too far into the narrative to really make it feel like a logical conclusion or next step. So what this Monsignor's been doing is he's been giving his blood in communion to the rest of the town, and that is why they're aging backward. And speaking of aging backward, you'd think, right, this would be a great opportunity for people to notice people aging backward, right? You know, they see this 80-year-old woman look like she's 30 and they're like, huh, that's weird. Or Henry Thomas, aging 20 years younger, might even just look at himself in the mirror and say, oh man, where's my gray hair? Why is my skin so elastic? What's going on here? That never, ever happens in this show. It's as if aging backward is just a very normal occurrence. And again, easy stuff to fix, really easy stuff to fix. Have people notice other people and comment on the fact that that's odd. It's just really strange to me how these glaring things were omitted from the story. So let us move to the end of this tale where the vampire is revealed. Yes, what they call him as the angel, even though he looks like basically Meg Mucklebones from Legend. And finally, on this very important night, this midnight mass, he opens the doors, the Monsignor, and allows this quote-unquote angel to enter. And he looks very much like a vampire, like you'd expect. And people are like, okay, cool, that's fine. Totally normal, just like all the people who are aging backward. But then the next brilliance of writing comes up when to become a full vampire like him, they must die, right? They must die to become reborn again. And so rather than, shooting themselves in the head or on the heart or something simple, what they do is, because this has been, seeded throughout the entire show, they bring in the rat poison because that's a great way to go. So most everybody becomes vampires. They buy into the promises of the Monsignor, all except one man, or a few people actually. But let us talk about this one man, the sheriff, which brings us to the point of very awkwardly forced racism into this show. Yes, the sheriff is a Middle Eastern man. He's Muslim, so right off the bat you understand, oh, there's going to be kind of a conflict here. We have an island full of 99% Catholics, and we have one guy and his son who's a Muslim. So okay, that could provide for some interesting story work. But what I mean by forced racism is there was a moment where one of the altar boys, who is a vampire, the sheriff, he decides to start trying to light one of the buildings on fire while all the vampires are literally like next to him. Rather than being all like covert about it and sneaky, he's just like, hey, I'm just gonna do this right here while they're on my back because Mike Flanagan had to get him in conflict with the vampires, and so he's like, what if I just put him right next to him? So anyway, one of the altar boys rushes out and he calls him a raghead. Yeah, a raghead. This kid's a vampire. He's thirsty for blood, but where he goes is a racial slur. Yeah, I'm not sure what he was trying to do here. I did like the concept of a Muslim man being on an island full of Catholics. I think that's an interesting plant for character development and story development. But honestly, he was like the racist token. That's really the only purpose he served. And my favorite part of this entire show is the very end when we have the vampire. He's out and about, flying around, feeding on people who are still not vampires. And he finds our beloved Erin, Riley Flynn's childhood sweetheart, the girl who lost her child. And he catches her, she's on her back, he's feeding on her. And what does she do? She gets a knife and starts cutting the membrane on his wings, cutting holes in it. And I was laughing out loud because the vampire, he's feeding on her neck, eating her flesh, sucking her blood. And then every time she cuts, he just goes like, cut it out. But he doesn't do anything. And why would he, right? Vampires heal. We've already established that if you're a vampire and you get shot, you just come back from the dead. You can't, your wounds will miraculously heal, right? In fact, there's a moment right before this, like maybe 10 minutes before in this final episode, when that crazy religious lady, she gets shot by one of the non-vampire people and says, I'll see you in 5 minutes. So we've seen multiple people, she does wake up in about 5 minutes. So we see multiple people rise from from the dead after being attacked, shot with bullets. And so logic dictates that this vampire's wings will heal, right? Well, guess what? They don't. So Aaron successfully cut the membranes of this vampire, and it flies around like a crazy chicken in the air. It can't get off the island, so it cannot spread its vampiric disease. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here, folks. And this is just scratching the surface, honestly. I could go on and on and on about so many things that were wrong with this show, but I think I should stop here. So let us make this somewhat of a positive experience, shall we? Let's talk about what we can learn. I like to learn things from bad things, learn things from good things. And, you know, this is a channel that is about storytelling, about writing, so let's talk about that. I think the main thing you can learn from this is theme. I brought it up earlier. You could tell that Mike Flanagan had a theme in mind. He had a message. He wanted to say something profound. And unfortunately, he chose to do that strictly through extensive monologue, right? Not even a conversation. It's literally monologue multiple times. He had some existential stuff he needed to get off his chest, and unfortunately it was written very, very poorly. And rather than, you know, tying it in with character action, character arc, and how all of that relates to the plot, he shoved it into character monologue. So that is the biggest thing I think we can learn here. I mean, you know, gaping plot holes aside, disrespecting your audience, all of that theme. So I think theme is powerful. I think theme is important in story. It generally develops while you're writing the story. You don't really go into it knowing what the theme is, at least not all of the time. But as I said, Mike Flanagan clearly had an agenda here. He had a theme that he wanted to jam down your throats, and he wanted to make sure you knew what that theme was, because he hammered it into your head over and over and over again through multiple characters, different angles, in a way that will make you cringe harder than you've ever cringed. So with all of that said, hopefully you're still with me. It is time for the score of Midnight Mass, and that score is going to be a 3.5 out of 10. Theme jammed down your throat exclusively through a monologue, gaping plot holes, choices that just disrespect the audience intelligence in episode 1. I mean, come on, with the old people, just hire different actors, right? We've come to expect that in film. I don't know what the critical drinker saw in it, and you may be asking yourself, well, why did you finish it? Why did you get so far? You're known for quitting things. Well, I said maybe this thing will solve its problems at the end. The critical drinker had to see something, right? He had to see a glimmer of something there. But unfortunately, the show just gets worse and worse and worse, to conclude in a very laugh out loud finale that you just want to forget. So that is it for me. If you would like to see me create and not critique, if you want to see some of my own work, check out my novels in the description. And if you'd like to support this channel, give me a like if you like the video, subscribe for story-related content. Come hang out with me on my Discord, where we talk about movies, books, storytelling, writing, all kinds of stuff like that. Thanks for hanging out with me, as always, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.